Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. I'm Gavin Schall, and today we go over the Knicks weekend that was. Did Tom Thibodeau do enough to save his job? Immanuel Quickley driving to the rim. Bipolar games, halves, sides of the basketball for Julius Randle and RJ Barrett. Cam Reddish out of the rotation? Question mark. So much more coming up right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. We want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. If you didn't know, we are now available on all platforms, and that includes on YouTube. So if you haven't checked out our smiling faces there, please do. Throw us a subscription. Throw us a comment. I know after this weekend, you have some thoughts to get off your chest. It's a safe space. Go in, go off, whatever you got to do. But who's talking to you? I'm Gavin Schall, your play-by-play broadcaster, or your play-by-play broadcaster, a play-by-play broadcaster, your play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. That's who I am. And typically I would be joined by Alex Wolf, editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website out there, but he is on vacation all week, so we will have plenty of fun guests to fill in the time. But for today, I decided to go solo, do my own version of Zach Lowe's 10 things, though I'm making it 12. I want you guys to get your money's worth, even though you do not pay me anything for this show. Anyways, the New York Knicks, wow, what a weekend. It looked like Tom Thibodeau was on his way out of town after a 121-100 loss to the Dallas Mavericks, a game that the Knicks were up by 14 in the second quarter and then proceeded to get outscored by 41-15 in the third, and were outscored individually in that third quarter by both Luka Doncic and perhaps more insultingly, Tim Hardaway Jr., who was raining fire in MSG, proceeded to call it a shooter's gym after the game. Just brutal stuff. And then just when you think you have the Knicks pinned down, they do the opposite. They hold the Cleveland Cavaliers to 81 points and 11-point victory. It's not only the Cavs' lowest point total on the season, it was the least points the Knicks had allowed by 21. They had not held another team under 100 all year. They hold the Cavs to just 81. It was a fantastic defensive performance and a surprisingly inspiring fourth quarter where the Knicks, despite not really finding any sort of offensive rhythm or luster down the stretch, stood on their heads defensively, shut down Donovan Mitchell in his Cavs Garden debut, and generally it was probably one of the Knicks' 2 or 3 most satisfying wins of the year. So where does that leave Tom Thibodeau? Let's go to our friend Ian Begley for that. He said there's one thing worth noting. Leon Rose is fiercely loyal to Tom Thibodeau, and I don't think he would take lightly the decision to make a coaching change. I would posit that this is the danger in hiring Tom Thibodeau in the first place. And I don't know about you guys. To me, for a while now, it has sort of felt like a situation where Leon Rose, and this is a fair appraisal of the situation, is looking at it as if firing Tom Thibodeau is kind of an insult to the job that he's done. And that would be right. And to be clear, I'm not saying an insult to the job Tom Thibodeau's done. I'm saying an insult to the job Leon Rose has done, and in turn would put him in very hot water with James Dolan. Possibly fair. Is that a reason for not firing him when the Knicks have failed to establish any kind of coherent identity, seemingly have failed to establish a direction as a team? Now, 2 1/4 years in, 2 1/3 years in to Tibbs' tenure, I would say that's fair. We can shuffle the deck chairs all we want, but it's still going to be the same ship. The Knicks are 23rd in the league in defensive rating. They're 15th in offensive rating. Just about the epitome of average. They're second in the league in made threes allowed. They're 0.1 ahead of the Houston Rockets, which is not where you want to be. What does this team want to be? What do they hope to accomplish this year? We've been told over and over again, it is to eventually find a star. And again, you look at the Knicks transactions or lack thereof in a vacuum throughout the year, throughout the 3 years, you can justify all of them. They've drafted well. Sure, like, would you rather have Devin Vassell than Obi Toppin? Would you rather have Tyrese Halliburton than Obi Toppin? Would you rather have Desmond Bane than Immanuel Quickley? Yes. But still good picks. Have those guys been developed properly? Have they been given a chance to shine? Have we gotten a substantial look at what these young talents look like playing together? Have we gotten over 100 minutes of Immanuel Quickley, Quentin Grimes, Obi Toppin, Cam Reddish on the floor together? Not even close. We don't really know what the Knicks' young core is. We don't know how they play together. And the scary thing is, at this rate, we might never know that. I'm skipping ahead, but Derrick Rose was out for this game. Apparently, that is temporary. That is not something that is likely to continue. And this front office has shown no real inclination to push Tom Thibodeau to say, hey, maybe it would be good if Immanuel Quickley was playing 30 minutes a night, considering he's our single most impactful player in terms of on-off differential. Maybe we should just get off of Julius Randle at this point. Like he's done enough to rehab his value. He's not a total sunk cost. Maybe we should get a look at Obi Toppin, considering that, I don't know. I don't know about you guys. I don't see a world where Julius Randle is a key figure on the next Knicks team that makes the conference finals or makes the NBA finals. It just doesn't seem like it's going to happen to me. Sure, they could go get a star. Is there a direction once they have a star? Isn't that a guy that you want to plug into a coherent system, kind of like the Cavs did with Donovan Mitchell, that already has established talents? Are they giving themselves a chance to know if there are guys who could be long-term starters on this team? Kind of, in some ways, but not really. They're not fully committing. And Tibbs is part and parcel to that. And the way he wants to play, the way he wants to win is part and parcel to that. And an archaic defensive system got blown up by the Mavs and then looked great against the Cavs. Was that just a disproportionately poor shooting night from two of the best shooters in the NBA, and Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell? Yeah. Was it part of great effort by the Knicks? Yeah. And that's where it gets really tricky, right? Because these guys on certain nights still play really, really hard for Tom Thibodeau. But rotation decisions that seem beneficial, like dumping Derrick Rose or occasionally not playing Julius Randle over a crucial stretch, are fleeting. And Tibbs always seems to want to go back to what he knows best. And it's the same lesson that we've taken away from Julius Randle. It's the same lesson I'm starting to take away from RJ Barrett. Tibbs is who he is. All these guys, Randle, maybe even RJ, are who they are. And we can't let the moments where it's working cloud the moments where it's completely broken. So those are my thoughts on Tom Thibodeau. Let's quickly talk rotations before wrapping up this opening segment. Cam Reddish did not play. Tom Thibodeau said that was a product of wanting to try a 9-man rotation, and Reddish was just the odd man out in that. When asked if it was a product of Reddish's defensive performance against Dallas, he said, I don't want to put anything on one guy. I don't believe in that. Reddish played just about his worst game of the season. I'm not counting the preseason because he was really awful in the preseason, but just about his worst game of the season against the Dallas Mavericks. It was really, really ugly, and it was a reminder that as good as he's been at points this year, there are stretches where he still looks like he doesn't really belong on an NBA floor and is losing the ball with no one on him and is rivaling Julius Randle for the league's biggest space cadet on the defensive end. But this is a guy whose praises we were rightfully singing as recently as 2 weeks ago, and looked like he was going to command somewhere between $15 to $20 million a year this offseason. And as our guy Jonathan Macri correctly noted in his newsletter, stretch of November 5th to November 6th, Reddish was averaging 30 minutes a night, and the Knicks were somehow even in his minutes despite the guys he was most often playing along, Jalen Brunson, RJ Barrett, and Julius Randle, being net negative. So he was clearly bringing something valuable, and he was very much playing within himself, attacking the basket off of closeouts, playing exceptionally smart defense, playing really unselfish offensively, taking smart threes, and eliminating the bad shots from his diet. Are we just completely giving up on that now that Quentin Grimes is back? Is there a world where the Knicks would be better off if they were giving up on RJ Barrett instead of Cam Reddish? I kind of think if you reversed where those guys were drafted and how they were acquired and RJ's contract, I think Reddish would be playing over him. And that's not completely fair in that RJ, even when he's hyper inefficient, at the very least, plays like a top option. Cam is an utter disaster trying to go one-on-one, trying to create without an advantage. He cannot do that. RJ has been really bad at it this year. He is still far better at it than Cam Reddish. So that is the counter argument to playing Cam over RJ. The reverse is that Cam actually plays within himself by and large, does not force the issue to the extent that RJ does, is quite a bit better shooter, and is just a far, far, far better defensive player this year. I don't know how big of a difference it would make. I kind of think that Cam should be getting a good chunk of RJ's time right now. We will see if things change down the road. But if this is somehow the end of Cam Reddish as a New York Knick, I, for one, will be bummed. As I think that is a guy who down the road will have moments for the New York Knicks. But Cam Reddish was not the only Knick benched in this game. Derrick Rose was as well. We will tell you a little bit more about that and why maybe it should be a permanent move in just a sec. But before we do, I need to tell you about Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. Book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. Find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just need to get from A to B. Test drive that new electric vehicle you've had your eye on to see how it fit into your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. I want to thank you one more time for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today. For your second listen, go check out Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. That includes Alex and I sometimes talking to our guy, Peter Bukowski. Locked On Sports today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, we are back on Locked On Knicks. Derrick Rose sitting out the Cleveland Cavaliers game. Tom Thibodeau saying that was just because it was a back-to-back. My theory on this is it was Tibbs test driving what this team looks like without Derrick Rose. And if he liked it, maybe he was going to stick with it. If he didn't like it, Rose was going to keep playing. I hate to say this because I am a big fan of Derrick Rose. I've said it many a time on this podcast. I think down the stretch, he, even more so than Julius Randle, was the Knicks' reason for their success in the 2021 season. I think he is a little bit past his prime. And not to say that there aren't stretches or moments where he isn't still a fantastic offensive player. I think he still very much has his burst on some nights more than others, but can absolutely toast guys, can absolutely make guys look stupid, is still an exceptionally smart passer, cagey driver, excellent pull-up shooter. The defense has gotten ugly at this point, and it is such a nice change of pace to have Deuce McBride in there, despite the fact that his elite shooting in the G League has not translated in any way in the NBA, just 1 for 15 from 3 so far this season. I think this team has more verve when Deuce is in there, and they need his defense more than they need Derrick Rose's offense. And it just falls into what we were talking about in the first segment. What could Deuce McBride be down the road? I'm not sure, but certainly something better than he is as a player right now. And at least on one end of the floor, he's already a very good player. Derrick Rose can only get worse than what he has been right now. I do not see the point in continuing to play him, with the exception of trying to improve his trade value. There was actually a report from Bleacher Report's Rick Bucher. You can question his reliability because some of his reports have proven to be a little bit iffy this past year. But he noted that Derrick Rose is of interest to the Dallas Mavericks, which makes total sense because Dallas basically wants to be Luka Doncic plus the New York Knicks of the last 4 or 5 seasons. And if Kemba Walker doesn't work out there, why not go the same direction as the New York Knicks and plug in Derrick Rose in his place? So that's the quote unquote incentive for continuing to play Rose. Personally, I don't really buy it. I think Deuce McBride or Cam Reddish, if you want to put Immanuel Quickley at point guard a little bit more, should be getting those minutes, and it's not particularly close. I want to talk about Immanuel Quickley, who had back-to-back really high-level games against the Cavs and Mavs. It was a little bit of stat padding against the Mavericks, where Quickley finished with 23 points. He was 7-11 from the field, 2 for 5 for 3, 7 of 10 from the free throw line. Of those 23 points, I think it was 13. It might have even been 15 of them coming in the fourth quarter, where the Mavs were playing their bench. And it was impressive, but you were like, all right, show me something real. I think he did that against the Cleveland Cavaliers and is looking more and more like the guy we saw over the last 5 or 6 games of last season, where it seemed like he was making this undeniable leap, driving the basketball. And to me, it's all about his ability to shift gears and change pace and use de-acceleration. This was something a guest on this podcast about 3 weeks ago, DJ, aka Ace Zulo, was discussing on Twitter. It's not quite to this level, but it's almost Harden-esque with Quickley's ability to start and stop. I mean, there's one play with Chetty Osman where he just put the brakes on. Osman froze up and Quickley just shot by him all the way to the bucket. That was just picture perfect. And particularly in the second quarter, where the Knicks really needed that scoring, when they had those bench-heavy lineups in, don't have Cam as an option in those bench-heavy lineups, and RJ was in the midst of just about his worst half of basketball of the season, which we will get to in just a sec, and quickly put together the following sequence. Had just a nasty Euro step on Kevin Love and an inside hand reverse finish. And then another pick and roll where he snaked around Kevin Love, little 1-2 step to the rim for a layup at the shot clock buzzer, then got a live grenade on the right wing with the shot clock dwindling, ticking down to 0. I think it was Isaac Okoro on him, and he just drove right into him, stopped, hit a banker that was heavily contested. Also played great defense on Darius Garland down the stretch. But this is a guy who has clearly put a lot of work in the offseason, both in terms of getting stronger, which I think has made a substantial difference for him around the basket, and just improving his layup package. His diversity of finishes around the rim have gotten so much better. You mix that in with his ability to change speeds, and he's at a different level as a finisher. Another great Macri stat from today. Over his first 12 games was at 7.5 points per night on 35% shooting. Over his last 12 is averaging 12.5 points per game on 46.8% shooting. So for a guy who is also right there with Quentin Grimes as the New York Knicks best overall, and Mitchell Robinson as the Knicks best overall defensive player, I think he is someone who should maybe not be in trade discussions and should probably be playing 30 minutes a night as a minimum. Julius Randle. Let's talk about a very mixed weekend for Julius Randle. I feel like I'm on a loop saying that because it's never, that Denver game was a notable exception. That Pistons game was a notable exception, but it's very clear cut. It's very rarely clear cut with Julius Randle, whether or not he's playing well, because it's a tale of two ends of the floor. We should start off by saying he is a dramatically improved offensive player from last season. As much as we rip him, as much as I still don't particularly want him on this team, he has been really good offensively for the most part. And that's not to say there aren't possessions that are terrible, where he is a total dead end, and he just kind of dies with the basketball. And we saw that against the Mavs and the Cavs, where they were never afraid to send a second defender over because they knew he wasn't going to recognize it fast enough, and they were very likely to get a steal. And that happened over and over again in the second half against the Mavs, and happened at least twice, if memory serves, against the Cavs. But his scoring has been out of this world the last couple of weeks. He had 21 points in the first half against the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's as aggressive as he's been all season, getting to the basket, drawing fouls, finishing with contact, bullying like good defenders. Like he just went through Isaac Okoro on one play for an and one against the Mavericks. He was driving and he's making these late passes that were really good, like drew two and just had this really unselfish slip pass to Derrick Rose. Threw in, like, I think this was on Osman against the Cavs, like the best crossover he's had all season, where he totally ditched him, got to the rim, had a nice lefty finish. Yeah, he's just been a good offensive player the last few weeks. Like I'm not a fan of his by any means. It's hard to say otherwise. And then even defensively in these two games, man, he had some really, really good moments. He was locking up Luka Doncic at points in the first half. And you could tell Luka, who's used to just bullying smaller players or speeding by bigger ones, he was kind of stunned by Julius Randle for a second. He's like, all right, this guy's as big as me. He's stronger than me, and he's faster than me. I don't really know what to do. And usually the answer with Julius is like, all right, give it 5 seconds because he will probably stop paying attention, and then you can go by him. But there were moments where he's really good. And then with 95 seconds left in the Cavs game, he got switched onto Darius Garland and absolutely locked him up. And Garland ended up just throwing the basketball away. And it's those flashes with Julius, right, that always leave us feeling burned. And a sense of like, man, if he could just do this all the time. But the issue with Julius Randle is he cannot do it all the time because those possessions were mixed in with ones where you can check this out on our guy Schwinn's Twitter, like possessions where he just sits and stares. Like he got switched on to Donovan Mitchell and he just sat in the paint, fell asleep. Mitchell hit a wide open corner three. It was one of the first times the Cavs got going all game long. I got really excited because there was a moment where he ran as hard as he has all season, getting back in transition on Evan Mobley. And I wrote, feels notable, really nice to see. Then literally like 2 possessions later, missed a shot, kind of walked back down the floor. And Chetty Osman got a layup, despite Darius Garland not seeing him initially and passing it to Evan Mobley, with Osman hopping up and down under the rim. Then Mobley threw him the ball, and Osman was still wide open about 3 seconds of real time later for the finish, because Julius just decided not to go back that play and decided not to play defense, decided to pout and stare at everyone else. And that is the story of Julius Randle's season. That's the story of really the last 3+ seasons with Julius Randle. His partner in crime, RJ Barrett, equally up and down, though without quite the same highs. We'll get into that in just a sec. But first, betonline.net. They are your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can go there for the latest odds trends for every professional sport and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, we've got it all at betonline.net. And we want to note that BetOnline has the latest odds for you on Coach of the Year. And the man I am looking at is Mike Brown, 12-1 odds at this point. I think he might win it because the Sacramento Kings making the playoffs for the first time in 16 years is going to be the ultimate feel-good story of this NBA season. I know as Knicks fans, we're occasionally of the mindset of misery loves company, and there's been some ire with the Kings over the years, but personally, I think that team is super fun. It'll be a heck of a job by Mike Brown if he guides them out of oblivion, at least temporarily. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So you can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. All right. Third and final segment, and there's only one place to go. RJ Barrett. Oh, boy. That was ugly in the first half against the Cavs. He was clanging open threes. He was repeatedly, and this has been probably the most worrying part of his season, where you expect him to, now 4th year in the league, to just be a better decision maker. He is just blindly driving into 2 or 3 defenders, and it's not an occasional occurrence. It happens a couple of times every single game, and it leads to a lot of turnovers. He had 4 in the first 12 minutes of this game. He had another one in the second quarter where, again, he was just blindly dribbling into a double. And he just, I mean, the plot should be simple. You draw two and you kick it and you let you trust your teammates to take advantage of a 4-on-3. But there is no trust, and there is a constant sense of having to prove that he's the guy. And this is something Mike Breen talks about a lot, but the NBA is a wake-up call for just about everyone. I mean, there are rare exceptions, right? The LeBrons, the KDs, the Lukas. But for most guys, you're not going to be the same guy in the NBA you were in college. You're certainly not going to be the same guy in the NBA you were in high school. It is about taking a step back, realizing that the talent around you is multitudes better than anything you've ever seen before, and saying, all right, how do I have to adjust my game? RJ has failed to do that throughout his career. He wants to be the same guy he was at Montverde. He almost wants to be more than he was at Duke, where he was second banana at points to Zion Williamson. And he's not that guy. He played much better to start the second half. He had 9 points in the first 4.5 minutes of the third quarter. Started hitting shots, started making better decisions, but there has to be a wake-up call at some point for RJ. If not, I don't know how this contract's going to age. And that is a scary thing for a deal that I was certain, and I think most people were certain following this team, that RJ had to do very little to justify. Quentin Grimes. I want to get to a positive, because I think we've been trending a little bit negative on this pod. But I got one pro and one con for Quentin Grimes, so bear with me. The pro, I think he is going to go down as one of the great role players of this era. If it's not on the Knicks, he is going to be a great player on a team that makes a run to at least the conference finals, if not an NBA championship at some point in his life. I feel very, very good about betting on that. His defense is special. He bothered the heck out of Luka Doncic for a half, held him to one of his worst performances in a half all season, battling through screens, allowing Mitchell Robinson to stay home, and bottling Luka up and containing both his passing and scoring in a way that you can count on one, maybe two hands, the guys on planet Earth who are able to guard Luka the way Grimes did in that first half. And then even in the second half, when Luka started getting going, like, Grimes was still making big plays on him, like back-to-back plays in the third quarter of that game. He had a chase down on Luka for a little poke away that led to a give and go dunk on the other end, and then came down and literally on the next possession stripped Luka, which was just fantastic. And he combines that with it's not only great one-on-one defense. He is an elite court sense in terms of his help defense. His anticipation is special. We saw that in the third quarter when he had Donovan Mitchell in the corner and gambled correctly to help off him, seeing Evan Mobley diving to the rim, sprinted in at the last second, picked off that pass. Offensively, he showed some great stuff as a cutter. Him and Jalen Brunson just have fantastic chemistry. And his ability to finish off of closeouts remains elite. He had one play against the Mavs where he beat Luka, had a little Euro around Reggie Bullock, and then had an inside hand reverse finish. And it was just, the only way I can sum it up is it's a play that I don't think anyone else on the Knicks over the last 5 years would have made. Maybe Immanuel Quickley on the right night. It has not been common for a Knick to cut off the ball like that and to be able to finish like that. Cam Reddish, I should say, is the other guy who has shown that he's capable of doing that off of a closeout. The one demerit for Quentin Grimes this weekend, he is predetermining what he is going to do off of closeouts. And I think the success he's had on those drives, combined with three-point shooting that has not been customary for him, in a bad way. He's not shooting well from three. It's the simple way to say that. Has led him to the conclusion that he is going to drive every time he catches the ball behind the arc, or almost every time he catches the ball behind the arc. And he is an elite shooter with elite technique, and he just needs to keep on firing, because his current slump is a blip on the radar. I feel very confident in saying that, despite the relatively small sample size of him being an excellent shooter in the NBA. He just needs to keep putting them up, and eventually they will even out to a minimum of 36 or 37% from three. And when he predetermines his reads, he becomes a much less effective driver as well. And if you are close to a 40% three-point shooter, those closeouts become even harder. His effectiveness as a finisher, as a playmaker becomes all the better. All right, let's finish up with 4 rapid-fire ones. The young lineups defense. Tibbs went with Immanuel Quickley, Deuce McBride, Quentin Grimes, Obi Toppin, and Isaiah Hartenstein to start the fourth. They didn't score the basketball. Not that they didn't get a field goal. They didn't score the basketball from 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter until around 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And the Knicks still won the game. And that's because they were playing fantastic defense. They were flying around. It reminded me a lot of the Nets game from last year. Our guy who's going to make an appearance on the podcast this week, Ariel Pacheco, noted that it reminded him of the Heat game from last year. It's just fun to watch. And to my point at the beginning of this show, I'd love to get more minutes with those guys. Of course, you want more offense. They could really use more creativity from Deuce. They could really use Quentin Grimes getting hot from three. They could use Obi Toppin, and we'll talk about this in just a sec. Continue to get more aggressive, but defensively, it is a thing of beauty. Those guys play on a string. They play hard. They play smart. They play physical. They are stifling. Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Hartenstein closing out the Cavs with a minute left in the game. Mitch first knocked a rebound away from Kevin Love, tipped it out to Quentin Grimes. And then with 48 seconds left after the Knicks took another 14 off the shot clock, he sprinted out of bounds on the run, saved it with his left hand to give the Knicks the ball back. And that stretch of hustle sealed the game. And for after an awful showing against the Mavericks and up and down one against the Cavs, a ray of light for Mitchell Robinson, and always good to see that his hustle is not contingent upon him getting the basketball. It is not contingent upon him scoring. And that stands in stark contrast to someone like Julius Randle. I just want to know Isaiah Hartenstein. I thought he was great in the third quarter of this game, really crashing the glass, really bothering the Cavs, creating extra possessions, getting putbacks. For a guy who's had a very rough stretch, he had some really good moments over this weekend. Obi Toppin, I liked him being more aggressive. This is a guy who is taking more than half his shots this season from three-point range. For one of the best finishers in the NBA, that is frustrating and not good. But these last two games, I think someone showed him the film, got in his head because he was looking a lot more aggressive, was pushing the ball against the Mavs. Like he had one play in transition where he missed it, but he just went right into Davis Bertans' body in transition instead of taking a pull-up shot, which was good to see. Had some nice cuts to the rim. Brunson hit him on one for a layup. That was very sneaky, where he kind of slowed up halfway through his cut and then sped all the way to the basket. In the fourth quarter, had a pump and go for a tough missed layup, but it led to a putback for Hartenstein. It was kind of like those classic RJ drives where you're like, all right, but he got the Kobe assist. Like he created room for Hartenstein on the rebound. And it was just really nice not to see him settling quite as much. Also had a really nice hook pass to Isaiah Hartenstein for a pick and roll finish. And it was one of those things where it's like, oh, wow, those two are really good passers and have really good synergy. It's almost like they could have been doing that all season. I hope we get to see more of those two playing together because it is beautiful basketball. All right, we'll finish up on this. Jalen Brunson in a clip on MSG. He said this during the Mavericks game or before the Mavericks game. He said, I made my bed. I got to lay in it, on reference to him signing with the New York Knicks. Now, we didn't get full context on this clip because it was cut into sort of a package and you didn't hear the initial question on it. So I want to reserve judgment, but I don't know about you guys. I just thought that was a little bit notable. And then positive note on Jalen Brunson. After starting the year shooting just 22 for 73 from three-point range, 30%, he is now 12 of his last 26. And I thought he was forcing it early in the year on his step backs. That is clearly something he worked on over the offseason, and he's trying to show it off, was clanging a bunch of them. They've looked a lot better recently. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle with him. It's probably about a 35 to 36% three-point shooter, but post Luka Doncic, with way more of them being self-created, with more of them being contested, that is perfectly fine with how special of a two-point finisher that he is. All right, guys, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. We will be back with a mailbag pod with a very special guest. I already spoiled it. It is our guy, Ariel Pacheco, one of the best in the biz. So check that out later today. But for now, I'm Gavin Schall. This is Locked On Knicks. Talk to you soon. Peace out.